All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It is Friday, so glad to be speaking to you. And please do, I'll just say right now, don't forget, click like, click subscribe. Again, the subscription number's inching up. We had kind of a jump, a couple of jumps recently, and then kind of flatlining a little bit. So love to see more of you subscribing. Got to get those numbers. I want to get to 500, get a little tiny bit. I think at 500, YouTube will send me some shekels, but very, very few. I would note that there's an effort, an attempt to deplatform or demonetize Brianna Joy Gray, my favorite non-Hal Ginsberg live streamer, podcaster, videologger out there, whatever you want to call her. I think she's great. I love Brianna Joy Gray. I try to, give her shout outs and also, cite to her live streams a lot. I put her videos up, and I understand there was an effort maybe by the Israeli government. She showed all these bots, like identical emails to her bad faith live stream podcast or bad faith podcast email address, calling for her to be kicked off YouTube. And she was laughing about it because she said, hey, you're writing to me. I'm not gonna, don't worry, I ain't booting myself off. I'm not deplatforming or demonetizing me. And I'm kind of wondering, how do you get on a list to be demonetized? Like, how do you get bots? How do you get the Israeli government or some other, nefarious group to try to kick you off the internet, or at least turn you away from any kind of financial remuneration? Because I don't think I'm on anybody's radar, and I'd kind of like to get on somebody's radar somewhere. And I think the only way that happens is if you, in fact, do subscribe, and if we keep seeing more and more folks who are watching and being part of Halitics. Great getting calls. Heard from Stephanie, and I'm going to respond, by the way, to some of the comments I received, including yesterday's call when Stephanie brought up the proposed canal. This has been kicked around for 70 years or so, the David Ben Gurion canal through Gaza. So I've got a little bit of information about that. I wasn't even aware of it until Stephanie brought it up yesterday, so I appreciate that. We'll also respond to Shade. But as I always try to do, tragically have no choice, I am going to center the people of Gaza first and foremost. And this is from Roya News. You can see that dateline. That is today, 3:41. No, it's not a tomorrow's newspaper. It's not like I got the race results in the 5th before that was run. This is from the Middle East, and Roya News is a Jordanian outfit. I don't think I've ever, I had no idea who they were, but I Googled Gaza death toll June 14, and this popped up. So you can see the numbers keep rising, 37,266, and that's up. Let's see if we can get the number over the past 24 hours. This is again reported by the Ministry of Health in Gaza, the Palestinian ministry there, and they report. And this is an interesting way that they characterize it at Roya News. You don't see this at Al Jazeera, but the way Roya News, this is again from Jordan, they quote, I believe, the Ministry of Health as reporting 4 massacres, which I have no problem with using the term 4 massacres because you have many people killed each time by Israel in these pogroms. But they describe those killed as martyrs and 71 injured. So this is clearly a Muslim-inflected or Islam-inflected news outlet, and they're definitely presenting this as a holy war. I think that's obviously not where I am with this. I don't think, Israel is definitely going to use religion to justify what it's doing. And Netanyahu and others have pointed to sections of the Bible of over 5,000 years old in some portions. At least that's how old the earth is, according to those who are literalists. They claim that God gave them Israel. Somehow that justifies what Israel's doing now, murdering, killing, massacring 30, almost 40,000 now Palestinians in the past 7 months. The response by at least the Ministry of Health, who they're quoting here, they're calling them martyrs, is, yeah, this is a holy war. And no, I think it's a war for land. It's not even a war. It's basically what we saw in the United States in the 19th century as the manifest destiny manifested itself in its bloodiest, ugliest form with the ethnic cleansing of the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples from the land, and the European American settlers taking complete control. And it seems like this may be what Israel's, well, I would say this is very clearly what Israel's trying to do in Gaza. But, you know, I watched this movie last night called The Zone of Interest, and it was up for some Academy Awards, may have won. And the point there was it follows the commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, and his wife and their family. And they're all in. I mean, they're totally good with all the murders, killing millions of Jews. And Höss was about the most effective and efficient at doing it. So he was richly rewarded. And his family just views themselves as beneficiaries of what Hitler called Lebensraum. This is the East. We're in the East. We're Poland, which is where Auschwitz was situated in Poland, so east of Germany. And Hitler talked about German people moving east and taking up more land, and this is the living space for them. And yeah, I mean, it's what Israel's doing too, right? In the West Bank, and now maybe, probably, apparently in Gaza, taking over that land, more living space for the Jewish people. It's just so horrifying, so wrong. I want to just note also the second paragraph there, because I've many times pointed out that we don't know just how many dead there are, and this is something that Fox News has noted, that you can't trust the Gaza numbers of dead. They come from Hamas, and there's just too much uncertainty. There's too much chaos. There's too much anarchy now. So we just don't know. We can't be confident in the figures that Hamas reports. And it's true. And they acknowledge it too. There are a number of victims under the rubble. So there may well be more dead than 34. I'd hardly call them, I don't believe in martyrdom. I don't think they're, dying for Allah at all. I mean, it's just a horrible, ugly, murderous rampage. And that's all. So I'm not going to embrace some kind of a narrative that casts the murdered victims as some kind of heroic martyrs. I think that's a way for Hamas to justify its ongoing efforts against Israel, and I don't support that. I'm on the side of the Palestinian people. I want Israel to stop killing. I want the architects of this mass murder in Gaza to be brought to justice. But I'm not going to call the victims of Israel's military martyrs. And if you want to say, you got to hold those responsible for October 7, they should be brought to justice too. I agree. I'd like to see that happen. I think they should be brought before an international court of justice and well represented with lawyers who will argue they were acting in defense of their homeland, in defense of their people. We'll see how that goes. Do give me a call, 240-242-5646. It is the free-for-all, so even more than usual, it's your opportunity to chime in, to share your views of the news of the day, whether I'm reporting it or whether you read it, you learned of it somewhere else, or you have questions. Would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. We'll probably go just that 1 hour, so don't wait too long if you want to join me. And a quick announcement, Arlen, Monday with Arlen will actually be Tuesday with Arlen next week. Arlen is going to be unavailable to do the live stream Monday. So I'll do the program without him. Maybe I'll have a guest host, maybe not, probably not at this point, and we'll have Arlen on Tuesday, which is always great, always a great discussion with Arlen. Oh, one other thing, I was listening to yesterday's live stream, and one thing I noticed, well, two things. One, the sort of less big issue, Shade pointed this out. Sometimes when you listen, especially live, or when I've just completed the live stream and it's processing, so you can actually watch at any point once I start broadcasting. But in that, the time, especially after I've stopped the stream, I've stopped streaming, but the video is still processing, it takes 5-10 minutes. When you listen during that time, you may hear clicks, you may hear some audio artifacts, as they call them. Hopefully those get ironed out. If you notice them afterwards, please let me know. Please put a comment in the section, because I really need to know about all technical problems. I try to listen to every program, at least part of it. It's hard for me sometimes. I got to be honest with you, listening to myself. I've already heard myself do this once. I don't know if I want to hear myself a second time, but I do my effort. I do my best to listen to a good chunk, if not all, of every program I broadcast. So I'll hear whether I made a mistake. Oh, the other point from yesterday or the day before, I had mentioned Beethoven, because I played that Für Elise, the little piano section from Beethoven. And the reason I brought up Beethoven is there's a lot of gloom and doom on my program. It's not a happy place. Sadly, it is just not a happy place. My main topics: genocide, endless war, ecocide, not real upbeat. I got it. I feel like I have to talk about it. This is what's on my mind. This is what's most important. I think we need to talk about these issues. They're existential without question, and we have an absolute, I believe, moral imperative to try to do something about it. I probably don't do nearly enough, but I do something. I try. At least I do this live stream, and hopefully we can join together to make a difference. But there is so much beauty in the world. That's what makes this so awful. If everything really were just completely dark and gray, and there was no art, and there was no biodiversity, there weren't beautiful animals. You know, there's a robin outside my deck, and I sit out there a lot of times, even though it's very hot right now, and I often do get chewed up by mosquitoes, but I get to see a robin sitting on her nest. I saw a fox scurrying across my yard. We have a lot of wildlife, not a big yard, but we have rabbits. We have, everything, deer. This whole area has just become more, rewilded in a way, because the animals have nowhere else to go. There's been bear sightings relatively near my house, and bear in mind, this is within a few miles of the Washington, D.C. line. This is very urbanized, and yet we even have bears living in our parks. No wolves, as far as I know, or cats, big cats. So lots of beauty. Mentioned the animals. What could be more beautiful than a Beethoven symphony? It's incredible. It's the apotheosis of the human, artistic endeavors. It's just extraordinary, and it's makes the hairs on your back or your neck stand up, and it's just so gorgeous every time I listen to the Ninth Symphony. And the Ode to Joy is so beautiful and so wonderful. So that, yes, it's something to be happy about, to be joyous that human beings can do something so glorious. But at the same time, of course, it's so tragic too, because that's what we're losing. That's what's being burned up by the climate holocaust, by the endless war, by the genocide in Gaza. That's what we're doing. To our fellow human beings, to our environment, and that's cause for hope and optimism that people can do something so perfect, and yet at the same time shows you what we're losing, what we're destroying. Yeah, I watched this movie, Zone of Interest, about Auschwitz and Host, and it really does kind of point out what Hannah Arendt said about Eichmann, that the banality of evil. This was sort of a bespectacled kind of a clerk type person. No offense to accountants, but he came across as kind of a CPA type person, and yet was responsible for millions of deaths. And Host, obviously responsible, perhaps the most responsible of any, having overseen Auschwitz, where it's estimated close to 3 million Jews died. And I know the total murders in the camps was around 3 million, and most were in Auschwitz. I know that there's the recent historiography suggests that even more Jews were killed in actions in shooting, Babi Yar, where the Jews were rounded up and shot into pits, and those types of mass slaughters rather than in camps. But obviously the camps were the locus of, the most concentrated slaughter. And Host was one of the worst monsters we've ever created, beings have ever created, and yet just sort of a non-entity, not a particularly interesting person, and a family person who apparently seemed to love his wife, love his kids, as far as you can tell. So sociopathic in his life, in his work, but otherwise a family person. It really does make you, I think, become much more able to understand what's happening in Gaza, that Israel is committing crimes that are maybe, I don't want to say they're quite on the level of the Nazis, but close. And if you're a Palestinian, do you really give a crap? Someone says, well, hey, the Jews in Germany and in Poland had it worse than you do now. You're like, okay. I mean, I don't know where that gets you. Right now, horrible evil is being perpetrated, and it's heartbreaking, it's heartrending, and it's more easy to understand, I think, when we look at history. Unfortunately, our history has not stopped us from engaging in the same, from the U.S. actually helping engage in a similar atrocity. So this is from Monday, right? And I talked about the ceasefire, and through the week we had Blinken talking about how Israel has accepted the ceasefire, that's all on Hamas, the pressure's on Hamas. So the report, which I didn't billboard or broadcast on Monday, had from the AP, the UN Security Council adopts a ceasefire resolution aimed at ending Israel-Hamas, they call it war. In that AOC interview or AOC dialogue, they call it a conflict. I mean, I call it a slaughter. But apparently this was a pretty good resolution, because of the 15 Security Council nations, 14 approved. The only one that didn't was Russia. They abstained. I think China was on board. India was on board. So, there's optimism at that point. And this is from that AP article on Monday. Biden said, the U.S. says Israel has accepted. So all they were waiting on was Hamas. And that just wasn't the case. It wasn't true. Israel did not agree. They had not agreed when Biden said that. And Netanyahu continued to push, or rather, Netanyahu never said, in that same article, I wondered where the idea came from that Israel had approved it, had agreed on it. Because in that exact AP piece, they quote, they note, I didn't say they quote, they note that Blinken was in Israel urging Netanyahu to accept the plan, and that he was skeptical, that Bibi was saying, no, we've got to destroy Hamas. And that plan that you laid out there doesn't say the end of Hamas. So no, we can't agree to that. So the U.S., the State Department, the president, I don't know who, somebody's gaslighting you, or it's just wishful thinking that somehow we had gotten some kind of assurances from Israel that they were going to say yes. It just wasn't true. And to the extent that either of the two parties that need to agree to the deal, Hamas and Israel, were on board, Hamas was much more on board. Hamas was much more positive in that article. They welcome the adoption of the resolution. They want to work with mediators. But they're going to say, we want a fully sovereign Palestinian state, and we're going to struggle against occupation. Well, what's wrong with that? It seems like to me that's perfectly reasonable. Of course they're going to be struggling against occupation, and they want Israel out. That was their main requirement. Again, I said this yesterday, Hamas acting reasonably, rationally. Israel determined to, I think, eradicate. What other word can we use? Eradicate Gaza. Eradicate Palestine. And we know that because Netanyahu says we're committed to the elimination of Hamas, and yet he has no plans for any kind of civilian authority, any kind of civilian rule, nothing. Just going to turn it into basically a desert. That's the Israeli plan for Gaza, clearly. And the U.S. very, very much enabling this. We're enabling. So eradicate genocide, murder, wipe them off the face of the earth. And again, we're enabling that. Blinken saying Israel accepted the proposal as is. Not true. Hamas didn't, and clear what needs to happen. It's just not true. It's false. He's gaslighting you. The New York Times, this is from Axios, they're publishing this without pushback because they're trying, they're part and parcel of this unholy alliance, this military, industrial, corporate media complex. They want you behind this, no matter how many Palestinian lives are lost. And even if you don't care about the Palestinian people, how about just the cost to our country and to our soul? I can't support this guy for president. There just isn't going to happen. I don't know how anyone can. And I get it. On this issue, Israel, Trump's probably even a little worse, if that's possible. It's pretty hard to be worse, right? It's pretty hard to be worse. We keep supplying Israel with the arms they're using to slaughter Palestinians. We're not pressuring Israel to take a deal. We're not pressuring Israel to get the hell out of there. So it's hard to be worse, but maybe we would be worse. Yesterday, after all that, Israel's agreed. Israel says they want the deal. Biden said, no, I don't expect a deal in the near future. It's not been embraced by Israel or Hamas. Now, we'd already heard Hamas was not, but Hamas's changes are kind of minimal. They want it to be a permanent ceasefire. And they're saying, hey, we're not going anywhere. You're not getting rid of us so easily. It's very ironic to me that this argument or the allegations were being made by the United States from the beginning, from Monday, and Blinken was repeating them through the week, that somehow Israel was on board and Palestine was not. Because Israel has said from the beginning, we're not going to sign anything, we're not going to agree to anything unless Hamas is gone completely. And we're certainly not going to agree to a permanent ceasefire unless, again, Hamas is out. We're not going to agree to a temporary one. So it's kind of odd because the U.S. actually originally had said, well, it is reasonable for Hamas not to disband, not to just disappear completely. And a permanent ceasefire is what we all want. So that was the original plan, or the plan as of Monday. And Israel was never on board either of those. So it was just false. It wasn't accurate. Were they lying? I don't know. Wishful thinking? Probably both. A little bit of both. By the way, good morning, Emogi. Great to see you in the chat. And more and more people, right? We want to get the chat humming. We want to get the calls coming in and really turn this program into kind of a town hall, as what was Tom Hartman used to say, America's town hall. Yeah, things not good. Not good at all in Gaza, and any hopes, optimism that they might resolve into something better, an end to the killing. This is the deadliest place on earth. The numbers are astounding. The UN has already condemned Israel for many things, including the remarkably high, unparalleled in recent decades death rate of children, women, non-combatants. Horrific, horrifying. There's another war zone. I don't even call this a war zone. It's a slaughter zone. But Ukraine, yes, that's a war. Two armies, two countries going at it. One of them getting our support, our aid, is Ukraine. And if you had hopes there, if you had hopes for some kind of a peace deal in Ukraine that it would end, yeah, you might want to rethink those hopes. You might want to reconsider. Joe Biden and Zelensky announcing 10-year security pact. This is today's paper. Guaranteed support. The war ain't going to end, not anytime soon. I'm sure the Lockheed Martin boys are very, very happy. Boeing, they're dancing a jig. I haven't checked the stock prices for those, but I'll bet you they've gone up as a result of this. Can't support him. Cannot support Joe Biden. You know, this article actually gives you a reason to vote for Trump. I hate to say it, but it's certainly a reason not to vote for Biden. But I hate to say that, but the Times frets that if Trump gets elected, maybe we won't be sending all those arms. We won't be able to prolong the agony. We won't be able to draw out the bloodshed in Eastern Europe for 10 years. Because Trump doesn't want to do that. Let's go to, we got a video here. Let's get to it. This is going to be of, I got two, I think. One is, let's see, was it? Let's see. No, looks like I don't have that. All right, we will. Yeah, here we go. So this is, here is Zelensky announcing, and this was an interesting video because I got this off of Michael Tracy's Twitter feed. And I've mentioned Tracy before. He's a journalist who I think is quite good. And he gets a bit of flack and, you know, he's kind of mocked a little bit. He hasn't really blown up as much as some of the other progressives on social media. But he's very, very well informed. He does really good work. And you can see the little tweet he put out there. There's the video. Ominous moment at the G7 today, so that would be yesterday. Zelensky says he had a personal phone conversation with President Xi of China. Okay, and she assured him that China will not give Russia to use weapons against Ukraine. So let's play that and see what really happened and how there is a real potential for some kind of World War III to break out with the superpowers, Russia, China, the United States.
First of all, I had phone conversation with the leader of China by phone. He said that he will not sell any weapon to Russia. That is the first. We'll see with you. We'll see. But he said to me, if he is a respectable person, he will not, because he...
So Zelensky at this media conference in Italy, trying to alleviate fears that the announcement that the U.S. is going to be in Ukraine for another 10 years, providing support, could ramp up the tensions even more, could lead to some kind of a hot war, and China might be getting involved as well. We know China supports Russia, not too aggressively, not as aggressively as NATO and the U.S. support. Well, the U.S. is part of NATO, but the U.S. and the entire NATO support Ukraine. Of course, that's hurting European social democratic or liberal democracies, if you want to call them that, with Marine Le Pen in France quite possibly becoming the next prime minister there, given that, or president, I should say, because Macron is all in for the ongoing war against Russia and has even threatened to put French troops in Ukraine. And this could well lead to the election of the right wing, the far right party in France to power. All right, here is Zelensky talking about China.
Gave me the word. The second, you know very good with details our peace formula. It's very open for everybody, basing on charter, yes, UN, and you know that it bases on next principles: territorial integrity, sovereignty, nuclear security, food security. If China has alternative view on it, it can prepare alternative peace formula. If we share common views on it, like with globally with all the world, I think so. So if they share the same way to peace, we will find dialogue.
By the way, China is not supplying weapons, but the ability to produce those weapons and the technology available to do it. So it is, in fact, helping Russia. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so there's the press conference, and I put up the little quote there from 1984 because I thought it was kind of relevant, where Zelensky is going on and on about how this is going to be a way to peace, is to keep the war going. And it's exactly like in 1984 when Orwell talked about war is peace. That was a slogan of the party. Also would note that there is real risk, real fear, legitimate fear that Russia and China will be aligned in ways that are very harmful to the cause of peace and obviously against our global interest. Emogi noting that Michael Tracy would not likely call himself a progressive. Emogi's actual words: I don't think Tracy would call himself a progressive. If I said, and I guess I did say that Tracy was a progressive, that's a really interesting point, because I was wondering about that term, Emogi. Has it become tainted? Has it become polluted? I know there are folks out there who are saying I'm no longer a progressive, and they cite to certain positions that seem to be aligned with progressives. I don't know whether Tracy would call himself a progressive or not. A lot of times journalists don't like to identify themselves with a particular ideology. I still call myself a progressive, even though some of my views are clearly not embraced by many on the left. But ultimately, my views on wealth and income distribution, endless war, and the environment, I think, pretty much make me a progressive, even if on identity politics, especially DEI and other issues, some progressives disagree with me vehemently, or some who call themselves progressive disagree with me vehemently. Yeah, I'm very concerned. Obviously, I don't want us to keep the billions and billions of dollars that we're pouring into Ukraine. It's actually more expensive. We're spending far more there than we are even on Israel. It's terrible. We're ripping that country apart. We're helping destroy it. And those of you who would argue, well, it's Russia. It's all on Russia. Why are you blaming the United States? Russia. I thought that Stephen Wertheim really did lay this out about as well as I've seen in the New York Times. Kind of channeling his inner John Mearsheimer, not quite as good as Mearsheimer, but this is in the paper of record, right? This is in that the gray lady, the New York Times. Biden is not helping matters with respect to Russian aggression. Couching the conflict as a battle between democracy and autocracy, making few visible efforts. I would say none. I'm not aware of any visible efforts to seek peace through democracy. He's asking other countries time for an endless struggle, which is true. That's what he's asking, and it is putting in grave danger the centrist hold over Western European countries. Because the people don't want this war. They don't want to send troops to Ukraine. And if that's what Western democracies, social democratic parties are going to call for, people are going to turn against them. It's just that simple. You can blame the people. You can say that they're ignorant. They want another war. They forgot how bad things were when the fascists were in power. Well, people do forget pretty quickly how bad things were in the past if things are bad in the present. If they can't retire because when they were planning to, because the president raises the retirement age. If he says your kids are going to have to go fight some war on the other side of the continent, when it's very unclear what the even purpose of that war is, there's no end game, there's no effort to prevent it from happening, yeah, you're going to lose support. You're going to possibly be voted out of office, and the people who win could be even worse. It's true. And that's where we are right now, certainly in Europe. And this foreign policy by Biden. His one real foreign policy success was doing what Trump started, which was pulling us out of Afghanistan. That was the one foreign policy success you can look at, you can point to, and I'd hardly say that's an argument for re-electing him. Hardly any nations besides U.S. allies have imposed sanctions on Russia. And the idea that we were going to now, and the real fear, which Wertheim points out in the New York Times, is China becoming the hegemon in Asia. The goal that we might have to have a coalition of democracies or kind of democracy, and Taiwan's a democracy, Japan's a democracy. Trying to isolate South Korea is a democracy. Trying to isolate China has become much tougher because now China and Russia are aligned. Of course, China and Russia have an incredibly long border. So this is not working out well for us. Moreover, our warmongering around the globe not only costing us tremendous amount of blood and tremendous amount of treasure, other people's blood being shed as a result, it's also pissing countries around the world off at us, as most certainly is our Biden's policy of pro-genocide. All right, it is the free-for-all. Give me a call, 240-242-5646. We got that in. Why? I just thought I'd make this point one more time because it was done so well in the video that I played the segment for with this Tusker. So I just wanted to do it one more time. Just why are we doing this when it's so clearly wrong? Why are we in Russia, Ukraine? Why are we fighting Russia apparently forever? And so let me get this video in because I think she does such a good job explaining it.
Tusker, why are people always picking on Russia?
Because, like I said, because Russia is a very large landmass filled with tons of natural resources. And they have sovereign control over their country. And we don't like it when a country has sovereign control over their resources. No matter where they are in the world, no matter whether they are liberal or communist or fascist. Now, the fascists will work with us because they'll help us get those resources from the people, but the others, not so. So that's always been the problem. They want to balkanize Russia. They want to split it up into tiny little pieces. They literally do want to install puppet governments. Like all the Zelenskys and all the people in Serbia and all those, not Serbia, they're not one. But like all of those people, to have those puppet governments be able to put in their NGOs, be able to run their PSYOP information campaigns, put their ruling class involved, and then they can dangle those countries by the strings, like all the natural resources. They want to do that with Russia, they want to do it with China, and they want to do it wrong.
Touche.
All right, so great analysis there. And just because I recognize, Tusker recognizes that we are in these conflicts, which could become World War III, for the worst of reasons, greed, the influence of multinational corporations on our government, which pushing us to and get involved, to be in conflict with Russia. That doesn't mean Russia's a great country. That doesn't mean China's a great country. Those leaders are not good. They're autocrats for sure. It's not like anyone would want to live there. But if your argument is we have to stop them, you have to recognize that we're trying to do wrong by the people who live in the Federation, the Russian Federation as well. We're not going to be there to help them live decent lives and to control their own resources in their own country. We're there to exploit them and their land and their resources just as we have everywhere else in the world. And that makes our actions wrong, reprehensible. If we want freedom for the people in those countries, we should be pressuring Russia to treat them better. We certainly shouldn't be trying to destroy that country. And we've seen when we do that how badly things work out. I wanted to get to this story, the AOC, just a little bit more. I know we talked a lot about this anti-Semitism, played the clips from her meeting with the two Zionists, her kind of moral attack on anti-Semites. And I kind of want to focus on the ostensible reason that AOC did this in the first place. She did this, well, let her tell us why she did it. She's really concerned, and she gives you a specific a statement that I want to explore. And this got also was discussed on in Halitics on Facebook. So let's see if we can get this up here.
Right now, anti-Semitism is on the rise in America and across the world.
So you heard that, right? She said anti-Semitism is on the rise in America and across the world. So that is her justification, right? Well, this is a problem. It's a growing problem here and elsewhere. So we're going to talk about it. Now, I think we should talk about problems. And if you're going to try to solve them, that would be good. My issues are she didn't try to solve them. But I also question, is this really a problem? And even if it is it vastly overstated? How do we know whether this is a problem or not? How can we believe the people who say it's a problem? Let's see. This is from CBS News. Let's see if I can get I wanted to get the cover for it, but maybe I deleted it. So let's just give you this. So from CBS News, the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, said it recorded 2,031 incidents, which is up significantly from the same period in 2022. Hugely up. So that sure sounds like a big rise, right? A significant rise in anti-Semitism. Right, 4 times as much, right? 337%, over 4 times as many incidents over the same period. And we're going to learn that even in 2022, the numbers were up. So what does that tell us? Well, first of all, I question the ADL. I'm not going to just, because the ADL says it, I don't necessarily believe it. But, but they explain why they come to this conclusion. So using the ADL's definition of anti-Semitism, it appears there were. But of that enormous rise, most of them were linked to the Israel-Hamas war. So if you're protesting Israel's genocide, does that make it anti-Semitic? I mean, this rise, even if there are people who are out there saying at pro-peace rallies, at anti-Israel rallies, at rallies in support of the Palestinians, there may be people there who are saying kill all the Jews. I haven't heard that. I haven't seen that, but maybe that's happening. And I would agree that if someone's got a sign that says kill all the Jews, that's anti-Semitic. But if it's at a pro-peace rally that was instigated by Israel because of its war, its atrocities, its genocide, would that instead have occurred were it not for Israel's invasion, its occupation? No. So I can't say, even when you find an actual language sign that clearly is anti-Semitic, Jews are murderers, right? That's an anti-Semitic statement. But if you see that sign, not Israel is genocidal, Israelis are vicious, some nasty caricature of Net Bibi. That's not anti-Semitic. But if you see something that, shows some Shylock type character stomping on, wearing a Jewish yellow star, stomping on Palestinians, I would say that's anti-Semitic. But if it's only there because of what Israel is doing to Gaza, yes, it shows anti-Semitism, but does it really suggest it's on the rise, or does it just suggest that somebody who's anti-Semitic came out of the woodwork because of what Israel's doing? So no, I'm not necessarily accepting that claim. Then I look at what ADL calls, how they define anti-Semitism. And it includes acts, anti-Semitic rhetoric, expressions of support for terrorism against the state of Israel, which, by the way, I don't consider that anti-Semitic necessarily, right? If you say, let's bomb the United States, that's certainly anti-American. But what else is it? I mean, it's expressing anger. There's a lot of Jews in the United States who say, let's bomb the United States. It's not necessarily anti-Semitic. There's a lot of Christians here. Is it anti-Christian to say, let's bomb the United States? Israel's a country. You want terrorism against Israel, that doesn't make you an anti-Semite. You might be an anti-Semite, or you might just hate Israel. But even if it's not just expressions of support for terrorism, they define anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism. So I can't, and since we know almost all of the vast majority of the rise in alleged anti-Semitism is the result of, is arising out of Israel's pogroms in Gaza, I don't think we can be confident when the ADL tells us that there's a rise in anti-Semitism. Jewish people across America have experienced an average of almost 34 anti-Semitic incidents each day since October 7. Well, I'd have to say it's 68 because I haven't experienced one. I've experienced not one. So each of my 34 means that I didn't have, some other Jew must have experienced 68. It just isn't plausible. I'm not buying those numbers. I reject them. And since that's the source for AOC, how do you know? You state with such confidence there's anti-Semitism. Where? Give us examples. Give us sites. Now, I saw some online. I'm not going to play the videos, but you see people, poor people. I saw a woman on the subway. She was apparently spewing anti-Jewish language. Somebody drove up in a car next to a synagogue and started yelling at the people at the synagogue. Slurs. Those are anti-Semitic? Yes. Does that bespeak some horrible rise? What that tells you is that poor people, weak people, people who have little or no power, some of them may be anti-Semitic. And we should address that. That's a problem. We should deal with it. But AOC convening this summit with two top Zionists who wring their hands about mean language about Israel, that's going to get you nowhere. You want to address anti-Semitism, you know what you do? Enact your progressive populist agenda, AOC. Make sure everyone has health care. Make sure people have good jobs, that they can, with a future. And that no one has too much. So they don't see billionaires, some of whom are named Zuckerberg or Adelson. I guess he's dead now. Some of those billionaires, a pretty healthy number, are Jewish. And that has no, human nature being what it is, it's going to foster resentment, anger. People are going to be bitter. They're going to say, how come those people have it so good? And let's face it, we Jews have it pretty damn good compared to most people. It's going to cause a lot of anger. It's going to cause a lot of resentment. Is it fair? No. But the way to address that, to avoid that, is to demand justice for everybody. You want peace, work for justice. By the way, it's not just Jews who've seen a staggering increase in hate crimes against them, according to the New York Times, because this was in the New York Times. I'm sorry, CBS News. CBS News accepting the ADL's numbers. CBS also accepting CAIR's numbers, Council on Arab Islamic Relations, which I believe. So more complaints of bias or incense or requests for help than were complaints by Jews in that period of time. So what we are seeing is a wave of anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian hate. And those aren't from down and outers. Those aren't from people with little or no power. Those are from Congress. Those are from presidents of universities. Those are from billionaire class. That's where the hate against Muslims comes from. So again, AOC, I think that's where you should be focusing your concern. And one other point, so just want to be clear about this. How many were there between October 7 and how many incidents anti-Semitic did ADL report between 10/7 and 12/7? So 2 months, 2,031. And the vast majority of those are from the war because of the Israelis' attack on Gaza. And the number from CAIR is actually higher, 2171 complaints of bias. So there are more anti-Muslim hate incidents, and those are from people with power, with influence, with money. More against Muslims than against Jews, and there are far more Jews in this country than Muslims. So the percentage of that you're, as a Muslim, are going to be subject to a hate crime is far, far greater than if you're Jewish, even accepting those very sketchy, questionable, unlikely to be true numbers from ADL, because there's more than twice as many Jewish people as there are Muslims. So fewer hate crimes against Jewish people, and there are twice as many Jewish people. You're more than twice as likely to be the victim of a hate crime if you're a Muslim. That's what I would have liked AOC to talk about when she was meeting with those the Zionists to decry anti-Semitism. I want to go back to 22 because we saw that the number of incidents have gone up since 22, and in 22 they were higher than they had been before then. So the New York Times covering this, and they report here, in 22, and this 51 assaults in New York State, the highest ever since 79 when they first compiled the records. Sounds bad, right? Sounds like there's an increase, and maybe there was, and I'll come clean. I think there has been. I do think there's more anti-Semitism. We live in an angry, resentful country and an angrier and more resentful world, and that will, without question, manifest itself in anger against Jewish people, against elites, against people who are doing better or apparently doing better. I told you I saw this movie Zone of Interest, and there was a very powerful scene where the wife of the commandant, of the Auschwitz commandant, his wife's mother comes to visit. And she looks over at the wall, she says, "Is that the camp over there?" And the wife says yes, because they know what's going on. They know it's a death camp. And she says, "I wonder if Esther Silberman is in there." And then her daughter, because this is the commandant's mother-in-law, his wife's mother, who says, "I wonder if Esther Silberman is over there." And the wife says, her daughter says, "Didn't you used to work for her?" And she says, "Yes." Then she talks about, sounds like she had some anger towards her old boss. So when there's inequality, I'm not saying that makes it okay, right? That certainly doesn't. It explains why people will do the most awful things to each other, because they're jealous, they're angry, they're resentful, or they just want what they have. They have something they want. There are scenes in that movie, Zone of Interest, where the wives of the German officers who are in charge of the camp go through the belongings. They rummage through like the fur coats and the jewelry of the women who have been brought to the camp to be murdered. And they take their belongings, and with just maybe a little bit of regret, maybe they feel a slight remorse, but they want what those women had. And it inures them to the worst crime, one of the worst crimes humans have ever committed. And we see that in other atrocities, in other crimes against humanity. The African slave trade. Europeans wanted something that the Africans had, the blacks had, and that was their labor. They just wanted it. They took it. I want it, I'm going to take it. And now apparently Israel wants something that the Gazans have. They want their land, and what they don't want is their opinion. They don't want them to have any say over Israel's affairs. So, but kill them, take their land. If you want peace, you got to fight for justice. You got to stop that. You got to fight against that. And the only way to do it, I believe, is to make sure everyone has enough. No one has too much. So back in 2022, the ADL came out with this report talking about how anti-Semitism was rising in New York. And they focus, and it's exactly the same as today. Exactly the same. Several high-profile incidents occurred after, and I love the way the Times describes this, Israel's conflict with Hamas militants in Gaza, which killed, it wasn't Israel that killed 230 Palestinians, and just 12 Israelis were killed by Hamas. It wasn't Israel that killed those 230. The disproportionality, again, all on display. Almost 20 times as many Palestinians murdered, killed by Israel, however you want to describe it. That catalyzed incense, which then ADL calls anti-Semitic. Were they? Are violent clashes between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protesters in and around Times Square, are those really anti-Semitic? Or are they protesters between two groups, one of which is angry because its people are being murdered and persecuted and oppressed and kept in, having their land stolen, and the other that doesn't like being called out for doing that? I don't know that I would call that anti-Semitic. I wouldn't. All right, let's get to a couple comments. I want to get what Shade had to say. Shade not agreeing with me and my criticism, especially my criticism of AOC. There was more to it there, but I really want to just focus on this because when I read this comment, I was really taken by this. When I was saying, hey, I don't think AOC should have gone and done that dialogue with the ADL woman and this other sort of more centrist, ADL one more to the right, centrist, but both, all in for Israel, totally determined to support Israel, Zionists, believing that criticism of Israel can very easily, far too easily, spill over into outright, overt anti-Semitism, and AOC agreeing with them and agreeing that, yes, this is a big problem, and that we need to be patrolling our spaces. We need to make sure that we keep the anti-Semitism out of our spaces. Again, I don't think we should assume bad faith. I don't think we should assume bias, bigotry in people that we're working with. I think we should assume good faith. If they say or do things we are uncomfortable with, we say, this is why we're uncomfortable, and then we listen to their response. So the response from Shade to my criticism of AOC, AOC knows the score. She understands how to maximize her effectiveness. When you insist that she act only a way that you and only you deem perfect, you are asking that she, like you, make herself ineffective. All right, well, I don't know if I'm demanding perfection. I've never done that. My problem with my problem with AOC is not that she's not acting the way I want her to. It's not that she's not being perfect. I believe she's doing harm. I think she's taking attention away from the real victims, who are the Gazans, the Palestinian people, I think she's centering the oppressors. Not that all Jews are oppressors, not at all. But Israel is the Jewish state, and they're the ones who are persecuting and committing the genocide right now. Not all Jews, but Israeli Jews are committing genocide. I feel like AOC, I don't feel like it. She's clearly distracting us from that, and she's centering the oppressors as victims, at least in part victims. I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's maximizing effectiveness. I think that's maximizing harm. But I also don't even get at all the statement maximizing her effectiveness. What has she been effective at? What has she done that's been effective? I look around, I don't see Medicare for all. I don't see a Green New Deal. I don't see a president who says to Israel, we're not going to deliver any more arms to you. I don't see any of that. I don't see a progressive Democratic leader in Congress. I see a leader who's as bad or worse than Pelosi right now, and Hakeem Jeffries. I don't see her squad as this unified bulwark for justice. They couldn't stand together to get that. What was it? There was the Inflation Reduction Act, which was bad, and there was another one which was better. The Infrastructure, Build Back Better Infrastructure Act. That didn't pass, or nowhere near with the kind of numbers that you were hoping for. In terms of, I mean, it was very severely watered down. Bipartisan infrastructure, right? Is that the one that we were looking at? I don't remember, whatever. There was one that was good, and there was one. Build Back Better was good. BIF was not good. The Build Back Better it passed with major reductions in the amount of funds for good works. So I don't know where the idea that she's effective comes from. I hear this, but where is she effective? Her squad is balkanized. They all have their own little agendas. They can't stand together on any issue. And one of her squad members, her New York buddy, Jamal Bowman, is going to lose. And she's there campaigning for him. Good for her. That's nice. But she's not a unified squad that was talking together with this on the same key about Israel and about Islamophobia. I think would have a better chance of maybe saving Bowman's seat. And I don't, look, I'm not a fan of Bowman. I'm not a fan of AOC. If they lose, they lose. I'm not going to shed tears for them because I don't think they're making things better. But maybe if there were enough of them in Congress, they would. But we're not seeing that growth. We're not seeing that success. So the idea that AOC is effective, I'm totally flummoxed by. She's not effective. Our final comments for today, and I'm not going to play from that. Well, I'll just say in terms of her video with the two women, whose names totally escape me. Sorry, I'm bad with names. And I was going to play clips from it. She doesn't get them to in any way agree to work with her. Because if you want to talk about effectiveness, to me, effectiveness is, and I'll play it. Why not? Effectiveness would be you get kind of a willingness, a recognition. Yes, it's not just the pro-peace movement isn't just anti-Semites. There's something really important here, that what Israel's doing is just wrong. And we need to work together. And if you really want to fight anti-Semitism, you really have to fight for justice. And they say that a little bit, but then how are we going to do it? Work with me. Can we work together to stop Israeli genocide? And she doesn't get anything like that out of these women. So to me, where's the effectiveness? Where's her effectiveness? I'm not seeing it. And I don't think anyone else is either. All right, let's play that clip. What the heck? By the way, the names are there right on the screen for you. Amy Spitalnik and Stacy Burdett. I don't even really know what groups they are, but let's play the video. Burdett is with the Holocaust Museum, which has really betrayed its mission to say never again. I guess it's only Jews who aren't supposed to be murdered because of their ethnicity or their religion. Everyone else, especially if Jews are committing it, I guess, if it's the Jewish state, they're allowed to do it. At least seems like that's her position. I'm not sure. At least the Holocaust Museum hasn't condemned the actions of Israel. All right, let's play this.
What you were talking about. How can someone starkly oppose the actions of the Netanyahu government while also avoiding anti-Semitism?
All right, so that to me is a really good question. You, Spitalnik, you, Burdett, are saying that we have to be very careful. We have to walk on eggshells around Jewish people when we criticize Israel. We have to be careful. We don't, use anti-Semitic tropes. Okay, fair enough. I'm going to ask you then, how do we criticize the Netanyahu government and what it's doing? How can we? And if she were effective, I think she'd get an answer. Let's see if she does.
Look, if we want to be problem solvers, we have to be able to have respectful, evidence-based conversations that are totally free of identity-based biases. And if you...
So that's lovely. That doesn't tell, there's not one, okay, talk about the number of people that Israel's killed in Gaza. Talk about the way Israel is oppressing Palestinians both on the West Bank and Gaza. Acknowledge. You could say this, hey, acknowledge that Israel really felt hurt, wounded, and it was wounded on October 7, and that has caused a lot of Israelis to see red. If you want to be effective and you want to talk about how bad Netanyahu is, here are the ways to do it. She hasn't identified so far, and it was a very clear question. If AOC were effective, she'd get an answer to this question, I think.
You make a judgment or an accusation about Israel that I think is wrong or unfair, I want to challenge you on the merits. All
right, so I would ask her right then, what are fair accusations against Israel? Because Burdett is saying, hey, because the question was, how can we engage in a good faith dialogue? How can we express our concerns about what Israel's doing? And so she says, well, if you say something about Israel that's unfair, I'm going to push back. That's a great opportunity. If she were effective, AOC would have gotten her to say, well, you can do this and you can do that. And I would have asked her right then, well, what has Israel done what criticism of Israel do you think are fair? What specifically, I know you're saying you'll push back if you think it's unfair. What is fair?
Challenge your argument on the merits. And I think we can have those conversations.
Well, there's no conversation. You didn't identify anything that Israel's done that's wrong, or even how to raise it, bring it up.
Israel is a country like ours. It's subject to criticism and protest and tough language that may hurt my ears that people use to hold it accountable. And the parameters around that should be, how would we speak about this country, right? Political protest and criticism are the essence of democracy. And we also need to take care with that expression because we need it for our democracy. I want to just mention a couple of pain points.
Not one issue, not one specific, what you can say, how you can say it. At no point does AOC get any acknowledgement from her of the pain that Israel is causing in exponentially greater amounts than the Palestinians have ever caused Israel. It's not even on her radar. If she were effective, if AOC were effective, there would be a real dialogue and a real recognition by these two Zionists that the country that they are supporting and that they're so protective of is doing terrible, terrible harm and committing terrible, terrible crimes.
In this moment, because if we can understand the harm some words do to other people, we can be attentive to prevent.
All right, so how about the harm that bombs do? It's like, I get sick of it. I can't listen to it anymore. I get really turned off by this crap. Again, if she's effective, I know I'm speeding forward because I had one more point that AOC makes that I wanted to respond to the question or to the argument that she's effective and I'm not. How is she effective? I agree. I haven't made any changes. I'm really bummed. I wish I were. I'm calling for a coalition of poor, struggling, and working people calling for demands for economic justice. and for peace, for climate justice. I'm real clear what those are. I agree with you. I haven't had the effect I'd like, but how is she? And she's a congressperson.
Is that many people who support and believe in Palestinian self-determination, in dignity, in rights, feel that false accusations and weaponizing accusations of anti-Semitism are often used to detract from the broader critique that they're making about the very real reality on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank and in the entire region. Amy, what do you say to folks who make this point, and how do you think about that very real dynamic that people are feeling?
All right, so this is another good question. And if she were effective, she'd get an answer to the question, which is, yeah, but they're false. You two are real quick to, she doesn't say it this way, this is how, you're real quick to cry anti-Semitism. But what about those who use the claim of anti-Semitism, who point fingers and say you're being anti-Semitic? They do it because it's a trick. It's to actually avoid discussing Israel's complicity. What about that?
Look, this is at the core of what we're talking about here, right? And that's why it's so important to do this work, to have conversations like this one across lines of disagreement, across different communities, as challenging as it may be, to understand where the line is. It's critical that people have a right to peacefully protest against policies that they disagree with, to speak out for Palestinian humanity and dignity and self-determination. And frankly, the same way that they would on any other issue. It's inherent to our democracy. And as I mentioned earlier, the majority of people showing up on campus or at other protests are doing so because they want to speak out for Palestinian dignity and human rights, not because they intend to be anti-Semitic. And so when we paint everyone...
All right, so these poor deluded souls, they don't intend to be anti-Semitic, says Amy Spitalnik of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. They just inadvertently are being anti-Semitic. This is the trick that they use. You can't even be at a protest without inadvertently being anti-Semitic, according to Spitalnik, at least many people. It's a trick. That's her trick. That way we don't have to discuss your legitimate grievances about Israel's killing civilians, women, men, in unparalleled numbers. That's the trick she's pulling. If AOC were effective, she'd be able to call it out. If AOC were effective, she'd get Spitalnik to acknowledge this. She doesn't. Spitalnik doesn't at any point acknowledge the pain, the agony that Israel is inflicting with bombs, not words, bombs, guns, bullets, missiles.
Showing up at these protests, speaking out against the war in Gaza with a broad brush, it makes it that much harder to effectively call out real anti-Semitism, and instead it just seeks to divide us.
Why are you, see, I don't even understand, why are you trying to call out anti-Semitism? Not that it's not a problem, maybe, but shouldn't you be calling out mass murder? Right? I mean, it seems to me that would be where I would be focused if I were you. You're a pretty influential Jewish person. You're the CEO of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. That sounds pretty big, like a pretty big shot, right? So you have some real influence. Why don't you use it to stop Jewish Israelis, Israeli Jews, from killing Palestinians? Don't you think if you really were concerned about anti-Semitism, ending it, that's what you would be doing? Right? Because a lot of people are angry at Jews because Jewish Israelis are killing thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people. If you're that concerned about anti-Semitism, why aren't you talking about that? And if AOC were effective, I think she'd get Spitalnik to acknowledge this point, but she doesn't.
At the same time, as we've talked about here, we've seen the line crossed in too many cases in ways that cause direct.
She says we've talked about it. There were zero examples of the line being crossed.
Harm to Jews, and that ultimately threatens all of us. And so for me, the guiding principle for all of this work is to understand that no one's going anywhere.
So there's her final statement. Palestinians, Israel ain't going nowhere. We're going to be right there on top of you. We're going to be pushing you around. We're going to be taking your land. We're going to do whatever the hell we want. And if you complain about it, we're going to call you anti-Semitic. I don't know how that message that AOC is disseminating makes her effective. I just don't. I understand she's effective, but I don't know how. I don't see I don't see anything she's done that's effective in a way that I would like in any event. All right, final topic. Went a little over an hour, which is fine. No problem. No worries. I'm allowed to go over an hour. This came up yesterday during Stephanie's call. This is with regard to this canal, right? She had mentioned a canal through Gaza. Is there some? Because clearly the actions by Israel and U.S.'s support of them in Gaza are driven in part, maybe in large part, maybe mostly by economic concerns. We want more land for Jews. We want to maintain our stranglehold over Israel. And so we have to push Palestinians around and prevent them from ever becoming Israeli citizens. And another economic concern, definitely in the region, is that the Suez Canal, there's the Red Sea, could be shut down, as it has been in the past. So the Suez Canal is in the top left, and you can see it's sort of highlighted in yellow. I'm going to show you a much better map. But it's not the red. The red, where the Houthis are, is Yemen, which is the bottom right of this map. So there's no way to avoid them. You got to go, to get to the Mediterranean, you got to go through those straits. And let me see if I can give you a little bit better. So where the Gulf of Aden in the bottom right goes into the Red Sea, that's where the Houthis are. And they're firing on ships. They're well placed to terrorize worldwide shipping going through the Red Sea. That wouldn't be where the David Ben-Gurion proposed canal would be. The David Ben-Gurion proposed canal is going to be up in the north. And let me see if I can give you a better map. So here we go. The left, the blue, where it says current route, that's the Suez Canal. And you can see it's pretty short. It's a straight shot to the Mediterranean. And that blue line there, where it says current route next to it in yellow, highlight, there's a lot of water there. So the canal isn't that long, and it's straight. The Ben-Gurion Canal would be very long, and it's not straight. It's either the pink or the magenta. It would cost billions and billions and billions to build. So why would it even be considered? And you can see it would go right through Gaza. Because the fear is that Egyptian Muslims, Muslim Brotherhood, zealots, whatever term you want to use to diminish them, would shut down the canal, which they can do. They have done. As long as the Egyptian government is relatively powerful, it can stop them. But not always. And in 1956, it was shut down. Israel, France, and the UK went to war with Egypt or against the Muslim Brotherhood to force them to reopen the canal. Ultimately, the U.S. brokered a settlement. But there's always a fear that, and I believe also when Sadat became president, just before he became president, there had been a lot of unrest. And again, the canal was shut down. It costs billions and billions of dollars. Very, very costly, expensive to multinational corporations. They don't like it. They don't, there's no certainty. We don't know when we can deliver. Our ships get lost. They get stuck. Costs us even more money. Time is money. The product gets, degrades over time. We can't sell it. So it's very disruptive when that Suez Canal is shut down. So another thought was, and we've got to get away from Egypt, because even though Egypt right now is a country we can count on, It may not be in the future. There's always a lot of unrest. That's where the Arab Spring was. So how do we get away from them? Well, instead of going up the left side, as you see in this map of the Sinai Peninsula, which is all Egypt, that's Egypt on both sides. We want to get away from Egypt. We go up the right side. Saudi Arabia's on the right, and we can count on Saudi Arabia. And then Jordan and Israel. Jordan is a little more stable. Israel is all in for the Western hegemony. So that would be the benefit. We don't have to worry about Egyptian disruption. I don't think it's going to happen. I understand the rationale there, but it just looks to me too expensive to build that through that desert. There's mountains there. There's no one there. It still could be subject to all sorts of terrorist attacks. But that's the proposal, and it is getting some attention. I just wanted to get that out there because I was so intrigued by what Stephanie had to say. And I could be completely wrong, right? It could well be that they're right now multinational corporations and Western governments in cahoots to build it, spend trillions, I would guess, could be trillions of dollars to build that damn thing. Well, at least many billions of your money, of my money, of our taxpayer money, of Western taxpayer money, all spent in the service of facilitating global trade. All right, I will, thus the profits of multinational corporations. I'll be back Monday. We'll not have Arlen. We will not have an Arlen Monday. We'll have an Arlen Tuesday. We'll have a Hal Monday. And I hope you have a great weekend.